Hi, Rupert.
Hello.
I'm Judith.
Hello, Judith.
I have a question that has followed me in my spiritual path for probably 50 years. Early on in my search, I read a little book called The Way of the Pilgrim.
One of my favorite books,
And in that book,
or at least in my early days, yes.
in that book, he reads a book called the Philokalia. And in that book, it suggests that he pray unceasingly. And so part of his journey is to try to accomplish unceasing prayer. And so I set out to try to do that myself.
As did I, yeah.
And I found probably the very first volume in print of the Philokalia, and started to read that, which was like fairly inaccessible for me at that time in my life. But the question of praying unceasingly followed me, and at different times I would try like different things. At one point, I realized that a song that had a really strong hook in it could be like going on in my mind over and over, and I could be thinking about something else simultaneously. So I thought, maybe if I could put a prayer on that track, then I could have unceasing prayer and go about my life. But that didn't work either. So then later, when I became active in the Sufi work, and we did a lot of chanting, and I thought, well, that's a perfect way to pray unceasingly, is to, find a way to have the chant, La ilaha illallah, or, Allahu, or, whatever, some prayer going constantly in the back of my mind. And so those different experiences took place over years. And finally, I just kind of gave up and thought, well, it makes my head too confused to try to do this. So too much thinking, and, I sort of dropped the question. And then I heard in one of your recent videos, and I think it was, "There's no reality except God," or some title like that really is the translation of a very prominent Sufi prayer or chant, La ilaha illallah. And at some point you mentioned praying unceasingly, and I went, what? Like that question came up again, and I would really love to hear you speak about that.
Well, our early spiritual paths are remarkably similar. I spent a lot of time trying to pray without ceasing. And I went to Mount Athos. I loved the book, The Way of the Pilgrim, and then the next book, The Pilgrim Continues on His Way. They were my favorite books for many, many years. And there's another book that you probably know, The Practice of the Presence of God, by Brother Lawrence, who I think he was a cook in a Cistercian monastery whose practice was simply to pray without ceasing. These books were my practice. They were my inspiration, my guides. So like you, I tried to pray without ceasing. I synchronized my breath with God's name, so that whenever I was breathing, I would just say the name of God in and out. I tried exactly as you did, and it was beautiful, and it wasn't a mechanical habit. It was very much, it was connected to my heart. But like you, it was difficult and in the end frustrating, because life didn't require me. I also wanted to give my attention to other things. I wanted to be an artist. There were other things that I wanted to do with my mind. And at College House, where I was in London in the first, from my mid-teens to roughly my mid-30s, in the classical school of Advaita Vedanta, we used to there were these we used to call them couplets that we used to learn off by heart. They were kind of inspirational sayings, and one of them that I remember very well along these lines, and it fascinated me and touched me very deeply. It went like this. By the way, the word Paramatman is the traditional Vedantic word for the universal self or universal consciousness. Atman meaning the self, and Param meaning the ultimate. So Paramatman means the ultimate self or God or infinite consciousness. And so this couplet was something like this. Vyasa, who wrote the Bhagavad Gita, said, "I have made a critical study of all the scriptures several times. And the gist of all that I have found is that one should hold the Paramatman in one's heart and in one's mind at all times and under all circumstances." And that was basically my practice for 20 years. But I also, like you, found it difficult, as I say, because I wanted to do other things with my mind. I noticed that I continually forgot God's presence because I was giving my attention to something else, and therefore I felt that I was failing, and then a feeling of guilt comes with that. So it was frustrating. Something was missing. I had exactly the same question that you have. So then I realized that it's not praying without ceasing. It's not literally repeating something in your mind. That is the crudest interpretation of what it means to pray without ceasing. That it was more an attitude of the heart. So I had this prayer, which also came from the Shankaracharya. And this prayer was about an attitude of the heart rather than what you do with your mind. And I repeated this prayer to myself pretty well every day, and actually I still do. And it goes like this. "O my Lord, my whole being is yourself. And this mind which has been given me is your consort. The life force, breath, and energy which you have given me are your attendants. This body is the temple in which I worship you. Whatever I eat or wear or do are all part of the worship I keep on performing at this temple. Even when this body goes to sleep at night, I feel I am in union with you. Whenever I walk, I feel I am going on pilgrimage to you. Whatever I speak is all in praise of you. In fact, whatever I do in this world in any way is all aimed at you. So there is no duality in this life of union with yourself." So this prayer replaced my attempt to pray without ceasing mentally. It became an attitude of my heart that just informed my life. That became my new practice. And then it evolved again. And this was really after I met Francis, and it became clear to me that when everything about myself that is not essential to me was removed, that what was left was just being. And that being is the knowledge that shines in us as I am. And it became clear to me that the knowledge of our being, divested of all the qualities that it derives from experience, is unlimited. I realized that my being is unlimited being, that the name, the phrase I am, doesn't refer to a personal being. It refers to unlimited being, to God's being. And it suddenly became clear that my being, what I thought was my individual being, is God's being. That there is no other being in me other than God's being. So the idea that I could somehow pray without ceasing to God, or even have this attitude towards God, beautiful practices as they were, I realized that they were still coming from the sense of separation. There was still a distance between myself and God. But this recognition that my being, what I thought was my being, it is the only being there is God's being, suddenly made it clear to me what praying without ceasing really means at the deepest level. That one's praying without ceasing is not something we have to do. It's what we are. We are this. Our being is this unceasing prayer, devotion to itself. It doesn't have to be something we do with our thoughts. It doesn't even have to be an attitude of the heart, although both are beautiful. It's that the pure knowledge I am is God's presence, not God's presence in us, for there is no us for God to be present in. There is only God's presence, only God's being. And there is no question of that being needing to pray. To whom would it move towards? So praying ceased then to be something that I do, ceased to be a movement of the mind or even a movement of the heart. It was just the shining of being. And all my experience is accompanied by being. Whatever I am experiencing, I am walking, I am sleeping, I am talking, I am writing, I think whatever I'm doing, it's always I am. I am is always at the heart of that experience. And to pray without ceasing ultimately means just the shining of being in the midst of my experience. Right now, being is shining in the midst of my experience. That's God's presence. Everything I experience is I am, you are, the world is, everything that exists is. What is the isness of all things? It's God's being. The isness of all things and the amness of all self is God's being. And what else is there to a thing other than its isness? What else is there to a person other than its being? That nothing else. That all there is to anything is its existence, God's being. So slowly the dynamism and the effort in this attempt to pray without ceasing, the effort began to subside. And prayer lost its dynamism, lost its sense of going towards. And praying without ceasing, it ceased being something I do and was revealed more and more as something I am. And that is what praying without ceasing really is.
Thank you so much. That's so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Rupert.